Hello YouTube. Next month, eh? Hey, it's still June. Not that far out. Still within the same calendar month. Anyway, today I am here to review Sign of the Cross by Kuzneski, which is about a scroll has been found which appears to suggest that Christianity was a lie set up by the Roman Empire of the time. I forget who it was. In the catacombs of Orvieto in Italy. And there's the first problem I have with the novel, you see. The Shroud of Turin has long been known to be fake. It was not the burial shroud of Christ. Never mind the fact that Christ himself is most likely never even existed. Still waiting for those mass deconversions from Christianity. Even addresses that in here. If something like that came up, people would just double down on their faith, which they do all the time. Because the whole thing about faith is it's believing despite, it's not in spite of, but often despite contradictory evidence. Having said all that, it is actually an interesting premise and it's handled fairly well. It's clear that there was a great deal of research put into this. However, the writing style is very amateurish. It feels very much like baby's first novel, so to speak. It's no mark against Kuzneski. I mean, everybody starts somewhere. Nobody's perfect the first time they do it. Nobody writes their masterpiece. Some of my early stuff was atrocious. So I can't comment on whether he's gotten any better. I mean, this is like 10 years old now. So I can't comment on his style of writing now. All I can tell you is about this one specific novel, and it feels like a very early work, which it probably is. It also feels very much like another chap who you might be familiar with, who seems to love this type of story. A certain Mr. Brown, Mr. Dan Brown, who I'm not particularly fond of, but curiously enough, I have one of his novels as well. I picked it up without realising it. I got both of these from my mother. So after, he's even name dropped a couple times in here. So after reading this one, I did go through this, and I must say, full disclosure, Dan Brown is another author that I'm not particularly fond of. However, like Stephen King, he is an author that I can appreciate. He does what he does it very well. It's just not the kind of thing I'm interested in. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Now, ending of chapters are where this really shows with the difference. He's trying to emulate Dan Brown and kind of getting the spirit of what he's going for, but not quite the heart. Ending chapters in particular are the ones where it most shows. Let me give you an example. Of course, if Payne had known that two of them wouldn't be climbing back down, he wouldn't have been so glib. It's not terrible, but it tells you it's one of those, it comes very much across like he's trying to tell you that something really important is going to happen, which is fine, but he's doing it in a way it's like, look, over here, something dramatic. Now compare that to Brown. God knows they deserve it, Ekstrom thought, never suspecting what calamity lay ahead. It's the same sort of feel, but it's very vague. It just tells you something is going to happen, which is often far more enticing because it leaves you wondering what. That actually sets it up, making you think that people are going to die. They don't, spoiler. Another one here. Payne and Jones thanked Barnes for his information, then followed his direction to the crash site, unaware that he'd be murdered less than an hour later. That was not so bad, but it gives away too much. It would have been better to say that they'd never see him again, or even they'd never see him alive again. It leaves a little bit more ambiguity. Another problem I had with this is that there are a lot of different plot threads going on. Payne and Jones are clearly the stars of this. Although it doesn't seem that way at the beginning, it focuses on a doctor and his assistant, who are major characters and play major roles in them. Those are the two that don't come back down the mountain with them as it happens. And there are a bunch of others as well. He does tie them all together quite nicely, actually, at the end. But it still feels like a bit too much. Now, having said that, I did find myself getting interested in the story, and I especially liked some of the characters. Payne and Jones were very well fleshed out. They were very likeable people. It reminds me of a quote from Mass Effect by Joker, when he's talking about Jacob, saying that the guy's far too nice for the number of ways he knows how to kill people. Payne and Jones are those sort of people. But they weren't the only ones. I did find myself engaging with the majority of the characters that were brought to life. Even the villains, they were very well fleshed out and well rounded. But it just felt like there were too many of them, and it was when certain things were introduced, it felt unnecessary. It's like we got these little flashbacks to previous scenes and little thoughts that characters were having. It didn't seem at all relevant, but they were brought in later. Interesting, that's something Dan Brown doesn't do. He likes to throw in random stuff as background material, and you're like, okay, that's interesting, but what the hell does that have to do with anything? That's for another time. My biggest complaint, though, is that there's a blatant cop-out ending. At the end, we find another scroll which completely debunks the first one. It's like, it was unnecessary. It should have just been left hanging, I felt. But I can appreciate why he did it. It's a very sensitive topic. It's also, again, clearly one of his earlier works. So I'd say if you're into that kind of thing, the conspiracy and, Christian myth and all that kind of thing, it's well worth reading. There's a lot of information in there. The writing style gets a little grating for me personally, but for most people, I don't expect it'll be that much of a problem, because most people don't dig as deep into it as I do. They're not as nitpicky. I mean, I tend to be very verbose in the way I write. I have I have entire chapters that are all stream of consciousness thoughts of a character. So, yeah, I'm kind of pretentious like that. But it's well worth reading. The characters are quite interesting. I know that Jones and Payne go on to be major characters in some of his other works. It says right at the back that there'll be another one from them. And also, I think it was at the beginning, it mentions a bibliography anyway, saying that he's written other novels with those two chaps in. So I might check some of them out. Yeah, there we are. Sword of God, the new Payne and Jones thriller from international best-selling author Chris Kuzneski, out in November 2007. Long and the short of it, decent book, a very good early attempt, just not one I particularly cared for, but still, well worth looking into. Next month, I will be doing what I was supposed to be doing this month. Next month being like a week from now, so I don't know how it'll be at some point anyway. But next time I will be doing Metro 2034 by Dmitry Glukhovsky, the sequel to Metro 2033, and nothing whatsoever to do with the game Metro 2034, though I do know he's planning on releasing Metro 2035, which follows that more closely. So anyway, until then, thank you for watching. I won't be quite as late next time, I promise. I promise. I promise. I promise. Fingers crossed. Each.